I'm going to start this video out by asking you a question. Now, in basketball, is it legal to move your pivot foot? Or lift it, I should say, lift your pivot foot. Is it legal to lift your pivot foot? If you answered no, then you would be wrong, and this video might be for you. So today we're going to go through the high school basketball rule book of traveling to see what is a travel and what is not. So earlier today I made a video, and so I'm going to be reacting to it right now. So the first article in the high school, mind you, this is a high school rule book, not the NBA. So first article: a player who catches the ball with both feet on the floor may pivot using either foot. When one foot is lifted, the other is the pivot foot. So this is a pretty easy one. Here's an example. There, he catches with both feet, so he can choose. In this case, I chose my left. So that's a pretty simple one. All right, on to Article 2. A player who catches the ball while moving or dribbling may stop and establish a pivot foot as follows. So, A, if both feet are off the floor and the player lands, one, simultaneously on both feet, either foot may be the pivot. Now, this is if you are dribbling or if you catch the ball while moving, okay? So, let's look at some examples here. There, he catches the ball while moving. He catches it, and he can choose his pivot foot. That's pretty simple. Now, let's look at an example of when he's dribbling. That's how it looks in real time, slow motion. He stops, and you can choose your pivot foot there. So, that's also pretty simple. So, let's go to, all right, number 2. Article 2A2. If both feet are off the floor and the player lands on one foot followed by the other, the first to touch is the pivot. Okay? So, let's look at both examples of on the move, there, on the move, and dribbling. So, we'll go back in slow motion. On the move, catches, that's the first one to touch right here. So that would be his pivot. On a dribbling, right here. All right, stop right here. Hold up. I'm just going to back it up a little bit. Right there. This foot that is on the floor right now, that is not a step because I took that step in the motion of dribbling. That's an important thing to keep in mind. So that right there would be my first step, and that would be the first one to touch, so that's my pivot, followed by my second step, and my second step can go anywhere as long as I have a pivot. All right, on to Article 2A3. Okay, if both feet are off the floor and the player lands on one foot, the player may jump off that foot and simultaneously land on both. Neither foot can be a pivot in this case. Right there, okay. So if I pause it right there, the foot that's on the ground, that's not a step yet. Okay, that's my first step, right there, and that would be my second step. So I cannot pivot. I've already taken my second step. So in that case, you can't take a pivot foot. Right there. All right. Now on to Article 2B. All right, I'm just going to quickly move myself to the top here. All right. Come on. If one foot is on the floor, it is the pivot foot when the other foot touches in a step. Okay, so let's go back. Same thing up at the top. A player who catches the ball while moving or dribbling may stop and establish a pivot foot as follows. If one foot is on the floor, it is the pivot when the other foot touches in a step. So, let's look at an example. Okay, that was in real time. So, right there. I caught it with one foot on the ground, okay? So, the next step would be the pivot. That one. And then I can pivot wherever. All right. Okay, now on to Article 3, my favorite article, the reason why this is a video. Okay, let's read it. After coming to a stop and establishing a pivot foot, let me just move myself down here. The pivot foot may be lifted, but not returned to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try for a goal. Okay, so right there it says, Article 3, Rule A, the pivot foot may be lifted, but not returned to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try for a goal. So, this is the most controversial rule in basketball. Like, kind of ever, I believe so. And I was not taught it growing up. This was one of the first things I learned in high school basketball. And I was just listening to the coach, and me and my friends were like watching the coach do this, and we were so confused. And yeah, it's not taught growing up. And somehow, I'll explain a little bit, but somewhere along the way, a rule was kind of, how should I say? The wording of things switched up. So let's look at an example of what is legal. So these are all legal right here. And we'll go back and check for a second. And, yeah. And then very actually, that is legal as well. So, I'm going to go back and rewatch it, but let's read the rule again. After coming to a stop and establishing a pivot foot, the pivot foot may be lifted, but not returned to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try. So let's look at these over again and see exactly where it is. So I'm coming. I have my pivot. I establish my pivot foot. Now, it may be lifted. Right there. I lifted it. It just can't return to the floor before I try for a shot or I pass the ball. Right there. There. I pivot. I lifted it, and I shot it. There. I pivot. I lifted it, and I passed it. I lift it, shot it. There, I really actually just simply lift it, and then I shoot it. And that is all legal. So let's look at an example of what is a travel. So here, all right, I've established my pivot foot. It's my right. Now that was obviously a travel, but not for the reason why people think. If we back it up a little bit. So this is a travel because my pivot foot was moved, not because it was lifted. When it was lifted, that little split second in between. Hold up. Right, okay. Right before I put it down, it was legal. But since I put it down, that's where the travel comes in. And that's where the Mandela effect, I guess, or over time, it just was switched from lifted to move, or moved to lifted. So you can lift it, you just can't move it to another position. Like that. There. I can choose. I chose my right, so that my right is my pivot. I lifted it. Right now, I'm legal. But now, that is illegal. Alright. On to 3B. If the player jumps, neither foot may return to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try for goal. So now, okay, I actually don't have an example of that, but it goes along with A. If a player jumps, he has to either pass or shoot for a goal. Now, let's read Article 3 again. After coming to a stop and establishing a pivot foot, now down to C, the pivot foot may not be lifted before the ball is released to start a dribble. So there is where it may not be lifted. Okay? Let's look at an example there. So, lift it, but then I went for a dribble. So that is illegal. Let's look at that again. I can choose. I chose my right. I lifted it, which is legal, but then I went for a dribble, which is illegal. So, sadly, this basket does not count. So, there you go. Favorite article. All right, now on to Article 4. After coming to a stop when neither foot can be a pivot, A, one or both feet may be lifted, but may not be returned to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try for goal. Okay, so one or not. So there, I don't have a pivot, but I shot it. I don't have a pivot. I lifted one and then I shot it. There, I don't have a pivot. I can lift it and pass it. So let's look at this again. All right, let's back it up a little bit. All right. There's my first step. There's my second, so I don't have a pivot. And I just shoot a jump shot. You can obviously shoot a jump shot whenever. Now, there's 1, 2. I don't have a pivot. I can lift one up, which I did there, and I shot. And there, I jumped off, and I landed on, that's my second step. I can lift one and pass it. That's pretty simple. Now, Article 4, Rule B, neither foot may be lifted before the ball is released to start a dribble. So same thing for Article 3. But in this case, Article 3 was when you did have a pivot foot. Article 4 is when you do not have a pivot foot. And it's the same rules. So let's look at an example. All right, I don't have a pivot. I lifted, and then I started a dribble, which is illegal. There's 1, 2. I don't have a pivot. I lifted one. I'm legal right now, but I have to pass or shoot. Dribbling is not an option. All right, and this is the last article. So, Article 5, a player holding the ball, A, may not touch the floor with a knee or any other part of the body other than hand or foot. And B, after gaining control while on the floor and touching with other than hand or foot, may not attempt to get up or stand up. So there I had control, so I couldn't. That was illegal right there. But this one, the ball, I actually had it on the floor. So right there, I'm holding the ball, obviously. So obviously, I can't attempt to stand up. That is a travel, according to the rule book. All right. But if you look closely here, I'm actually not holding the ball. Okay. Right here, I'm just leaving on the floor, and that is the smart play. If you have control, if you're diving for a loose ball, don't pick it up and like slide on the floor. Instead, just kind of roll it towards you. Keep it on the floor. Don't hold the ball. So there, I'm not holding the ball because it's on the floor. So I can stand up, pick it up, and 1, 2. So, back to this Article 3. Article 3, Rule A. After coming to a stop and establishing a pivot foot, the pivot foot may be lifted but not returned to the floor before the ball is released on a pass or try for goal. And this move is commonly known as the step through. The step through is one of the most debated rules of basketball, like I said, ever. And you go ask your local ref before a game, hey, can I pick my pivot foot up? I'm guessing half of the refs will not say, yes, you can. But a step through is legal on all levels, not just the NBA. So these moves right here are legal. And they're very useful, and I don't know why I was not taught this growing up. But, yeah. So, learn the rule. Now, as long as I have this here, the gather step. This is not legal. It is legal in the NBA, but it's a pretty I wouldn't say stupid rule, but in the NBA there's a reason why a lot of people don't like watching the NBA. You might think that they're traveling all the time, but in fact the rules allow a lot more than you think. And this is an example of a legal move. Yeah, that was legal. Let's watch that again. Yeah, that was legal in the NBA by rule. All right, so I'm dribbling here. Now my left foot, that is not a step and on all levels because that was part of my dribble. So that's one. That in high school, that step I just took right there on my right foot, that would be the first step in high school. But in the NBA, that's called the gather step because you gathered the ball on that step. Now, in high school, you would have one more step. In the NBA, you actually have two steps. You have a gather, 1, 2. So gather, 1, 2. Yes, that is legal in the NBA. So that's why a lot of people complain about it. Yeah. Anyway, that is all I have. That is the video. So hopefully you learned something. So get better at basketball now.